The Polish government had ordered crucifixes removed from classroom walls, just as they had been banned in factories, hospitals, and other public institutions. Catholic bishops attacked the ban that had stirred waves of anger and resentment all across Poland. Ultimately, the government relented, insisting that the law remain in the books, but agreeing not to press for removal of the crucifixes, particularly in the schoolrooms. But one zealous communist school administrator decided that the law was the law. So one evening, he had 7 large crucifixes removed from lecture halls from where they had hung since the school's founding in the 1920s. Days later, a group of parents entered the school and hung more crosses. The administrator promptly had these taken down as well. The next day, 2/3 of the school's 600 students staged a sit-in. When heavily armed riot police arrived, the students were forced into the streets. Then they marched, crucifixes held high, to a nearby church where they were joined by 2,500 other students from nearby schools for a morning of prayer in support of the protest. Soldiers surrounded the church, but the pictures from inside of the students holding crosses high above their heads flashed around the world. So did the words of the priest who delivered the message to the weeping congregation that morning. He said, "There is no Poland without a cross." I would suggest to us here this morning that there is no hope without a cross. We've read this morning the story of the crucifixion. Most of us, I'm sure, would be familiar with that story. But I would suggest 3 things that we see at Calvary. First of all, we see a wealth of love. John 3:16, the golden text of the Bible, shares these words with us: "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son." On the cross of Calvary, we see a wealth of love. God gave his very best. God bankrupted heaven whenever Jesus hung on the cross and gave his life for our sins. If you were to look at Rembrandt's painting of the 3 crosses, your attention most likely would be drawn first to the center cross on which Jesus was hanging. Then as you would look at the crowd gathered around the foot of that cross, you'd be impressed by the various facial expressions and actions of the people involved in the awful crime of crucifying the Son of God. And if you scanned the painting long enough, your eyes would drift to the edge of the painting and catch sight of another figure almost hidden in the shadows. Art critics say this is a representation of Rembrandt himself, for he recognized that by his sins he helped nail Jesus to the cross. In the picture of the cross, we see a wealth of love for us, even though we caused him to go to that cruel cross. In the picture of the cross, we also see a willing Lord. He was willing to go to the cross for us. The God who had created the heavens and the earth, he went to the cross for you and me. The songwriter said, "One day I came to him. I was so thirsty. I asked for water. My throat was so dry, and he gave me water that I have never dreamed of. But for this water, my Lord had to die." He said, "I thirst," yet he made the rivers. He said, "I thirst," yet he made the sea. "I thirst," said the King of the ages. In his great thirst, he brought water to me. Aren't you glad he was willing to go to the cross for us? Not only do we see a wealth of love and a willing Lord, but we also see the worthy Lamb. In Revelation chapter 5, we read these words: And I saw on the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book written within, and on the backside sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals thereof?" And no man in heaven nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look thereon. And I wept much, because no man was found worthy to open and read the book, neither to look thereon. And one of the elders saith unto me, "Weep not. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, hath prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb, as it had been slain, having 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent forth into all the earth. And he came and took the book out of the right hand of him that sat upon the throne. And when he had taken the book, the 4 beasts and 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, having every one of them harps and golden vials of odors, which are the prayers of saints. And they sung a new song, saying, "Thou art worthy to take the book and to open the seals thereof, for thou wast slain and hast redeemed us to God by the blood out of every kindred and tongue and people and nation." He alone is worthy. Paul Harvey told the story about Boston preacher S.D. Gordon. He purchased he was preaching, and he placed a beat up, bent, rusted old bird cage beside his pulpit when he told this story. An unkempt, unwashed little lad about 10 years was coming up the alley swinging his old caved-in bird cage with several tiny birds shivering on the floor of it. The compassionate Dr. Gordon asked the boy where he had got the birds, and he said he trapped them. Dr. Gordon asked what he was going to do with them, and the boy said he was going to play with them and have fun with them. The preacher said, "Well, sooner or later you'll get tired of them. Then what are you going to do with them?" The lad said, "Well, I have some cats at home. They like birds. I'll feed them to my cats." Dr. Gordon said, "Son, how much do you want for the birds?" The boy, surprised, hesitated and said, "Mister, you don't want these birds. They're just plain old field birds. They can't even sing. They're ugly." The preacher said, "Just tell me, how much do you want?" The grubby little lad thought about it. He squinted up one of his eyes. He calculated and hesitated and said, $2. To his surprise, Dr. Gordon reached into his pocket and handed the boy 2 $1 bills. The preacher took the cage. The boy in a wink hurried up the alley. In a sheltered crevice between buildings, Dr. Gordon opened the door of the cage. Tapping on the rusty exterior, he encouraged the little birds, one at a time, to find their way out through the narrow door and fly away. Thus, having accounted for the empty cage beside his pulpit, the preacher went on to tell what seemed at first like a separate story about how once upon a time Jesus and the devil had engaged in a negotiation. Satan had boasted how he had baited a trap in Eden's garden and caught himself in a world. He caught himself a world full of people. What are you going to do with all those people in your cage? Jesus wanted to know. The devil said, "I'm going to play with them, tease them, make them marry and divorce and fight and kill one another. I'm going to teach them to throw bombs on one another. I'm going to have fun with them." Jesus said, "You can't have fun with them forever. When you get tired of playing, what are you going to do with them?" Satan said, "I'm just going to damn them. They're no good anyway. I'm going to kill them." Jesus said, "How much do you want for them?" Satan said, you can't be serious. If I sell them to you, they'll just spit on you, they'll hate you, they'll hit you and beat you, they'll hammer nails into you, they're no good. Jesus said, how much? Satan said, all of your tears and all of your blood, that's the price. Jesus took the cage, paid the price, and opened the door. In the cross of Calvary, we see a world, we see a wealth of love, we see a willing Lord, but thank God we see a worthy Lamb.